Hello, could you introduce yourself?
I'm Ellie. I am going into my second year at Woodhouse.
Right.
I did in my first year English literature, English language, philosophy and history, and I'm dropping philosophy.
I've got a series of questions I'd like to ask you. We'll try and run through them as quickly as possible. First one I want to ask is, as an AS student, can you tell me about the amount of hours you put into study outside of the class? So you had 4 hours per week per lesson. How many hours outside of your classes did you work throughout the year, and did it change?
It changed dramatically. At the beginning of the year, I think I was a bit kind of cocky and I only did a couple of hours a week, but it gradually got to 2 hours a day. And then by kind of Easter and the May half term and revising, there were days when I was doing 11 hours revision, which is a lot and was probably too much.
So you started by doing maybe 2 hours per day, every day. And when did that, by October, and when did that start to gradually increase?
I did a lot over Christmas for the January mocks. That was probably about 6 hours a day. But Easter was around the time when I really upped my game for exams, just to revise really.
And can we just have a little picture for students coming into the college of where you studied and how you study? For instance, do you play music? What kind of, what's your study environment?
I do like to play music. I went to the library quite a lot by the end of the year, and I always did that. And I liked, even though it was dead silent, I still liked to put my music in because it allowed me to focus more. But at home, I just close the door and play music through my speakers and do not disturb outside.
Right. So in your room?
Yeah.
Not with a TV on?
No, not the TV.
Okay, can you put a figure on the amount, on the number of books that you've taken out of the college LRC this year?
Ooh, 20 maybe, 25. A lot more after exams, surprisingly.
Right.
I kind of discovered it all over exam season instead of the beginning of the year, which I regret.
I see. And what was the major transition for you coming into study AS levels compared to your experience of being very successful at GCSEs?
There's a lot of independent learning and there's a lot of trust put into you as a student from the teachers to kind of go beyond what you've learned in lesson and what you're given, and not just do the bare minimum, like do more than what you're told and take a real interest in things. That can be quite challenging for some, because you do have a great amount of responsibility enforced on you, and you just have to kind of go with that and just do a lot of stuff on your own. Yeah.
So you do English literature, and how does that compare with the workload of your other subjects? Can you give us a little idea about the different demands subjects place on you?
English is a lot of reading, obviously, and reading novels and critical essays takes a lot longer than I imagine if you're doing maths problems. I don't do maths, but with history, for instance, the questions are shorter marks at AS level. So when I was practicing questions, it took me a lot less time to write a 12 marker really quickly as opposed to a 30 mark English essay mock, which takes an hour. So, yeah.
And what about, say, a subject like philosophy that you do? What were the challenges of that particular subject? Because it was a new subject for you. Many of our new students will be tackling a new subject.
Yeah, and because you haven't done it at GCSE, I mean, most secondary schools don't offer it at GCSE, and I haven't done it, or religious studies or anything like that. It is a whole new kind of mindset that you have to adapt, and it is a completely different writing style as well. You can't do it in the style of an English essay. Like, you can't do an English essay for history. They're all so different, which at GCSE, they're all kind of similar essay writing subjects, but with philosophy it was completely different, and it threw me at first, and I did badly at first. I was getting D's at the beginning of the year, but you just got to accept it, move on, practice, and you will get the hang of it.
So what did you do when it threw you, when you found it difficult? How did you overcome that difficulty when it arose?
I did a lot of extra reading actually, because if I it kind of upset me that I wasn't doing so well. To go from A stars at GCSE to then a D within like my first term was quite upsetting almost. So I really threw myself in and really tried to do better and to improve, and I did improve, thankfully.
That's really interesting what you say about getting D's is an upsetting thing for students used to getting A stars.
I mean, my philosophy teacher even said, I feel so sorry for you guys, you were all A-star students and here you are, all D's, and it is tough, but you've got to suck it up. And
How do you feel about that now, looking back on the year with that perspective of a year taken? How do you feel about that experience now?
I mean, I learned a lot because it made me work a lot harder, because I wasn't handed a good grade on a plate. I had to really work for it. Whereas at GCSE you're spoon-fed quite a lot of information, and you're given so much support and help. And you are given support and help, but only if you go out of your way to ask for it. It's not handed to you on a plate. You have to work for it and actively move forward and study.
Yes. Well, yeah, a lot of us feel that we really learn from our mistakes and from making mistakes, and we have to embrace making those mistakes, getting things wrong, and we kind of learn from that. If we were always to be avoiding mistakes, we're not really learning. Yeah, absolutely. But it's really hard. You pick up on that. That emotion is quite upsetting for some students coming in, that I'm not a D grade student, and that crisis of confidence that comes from that. But sucking it up and getting on through.
Everyone's in the same boat, especially the subjects that are brand new.
Yeah.
You just have to kind of accept it and move on and work really hard. And everyone gets better. No one I know has stayed at the same grade as they were at the beginning of the year. Everyone I know has gotten better grades, whether they be 1 grade up or 5 grades up.
Well, that's really reassuring to hear, I should imagine. What are you doing at the moment that will make you a top student that the universities are just going to grab and say, we need her?
A lot of reading, a lot of extra reading. I'm doing an EPQ, which is English and history based, so that's 7 books. And then for my personal statement, in hindsight I regret not doing as much wider reading as I could have done when studying exam texts, because I could have really used that as a focus point in my personal statement and talked about it to death. But I only did a couple of extra things that I felt weren't enough to talk about in great depth, so I'm doing a lot of extra reading for next year's course, for the coursework next year, but that will help me hopefully make me seem more appealing and going out my way.
How much reading are you planning to do over the summer? Just give us some insight into that.
Like I said, I've got 7 EPQ books, and I'm doing The Legend of King Arthur. So the first one was written in 828 AD. So I've got a lot of old kind of medieval texts to read, as well as brand new, the Once and Future King, 20th century kind of children's fiction.
Right, so this is the EPQ. I should just interject and say that it's an extended project that students can volunteer to take towards the end of their first year, and they can choose the topic they wish to study in greater depth, and you're doing yours on King Arthur. Yeah,
and then in contrast with that, I'm going to be reading a lot of Fitzgerald books in relation to Great Gatsby for coursework, but also to talk about, hopefully, in depth in my personal statement, because I read The Great Gatsby as soon as I was given it in June and loved it, and have just been reading since. And then I've got a book on the Russian Revolution to read as well. So the list is endless, but just I will be reading all summer long. Yeah.
Can you tell me about how you've used the resources available to you from this college over the year, and in what way you've benefited from the resources in your various subjects?
The library is always a good place to start. There are loads and loads of textbooks, and it's really easy to find them, because when you go in it can be quite daunting because it is so big and so quiet. But you just go up to librarians and ask, and it's fine, and I'll help you find practically any book. And then Woodle was good, especially with critical essays, because obviously the teachers had compiled those. And it saved you kind of trawling through the internet for hours trying to find something for a coursework, and they were just there for you. helpful.
Can you remember any of the topics to tutorials that you went to this year?
I went to almost every Emily Dickinson tutorial because we'd done it. It was the first thing we did in the English Lit course, so I'd kind of forgotten, not most of it, but I needed to I needed refreshing. So it was really good going over them again and sharing ideas with people from other classes as well. I got a lot of new interpretations from going to those tutorials, because obviously your class is limited in a sense.
So that's quite interesting. So you're a top student in your class, I hope you don't mind me saying that. And yet you still felt you needed to go to revision classes on the poems that you understood well in the first place because you forgot them.
You can't remember everything.
No.
I mean, once you go over them and you go, oh, okay, I remember doing this now, and you go over it again and again, and you're like an expert like you were the first time you learnt it. But, since then we did the exam text and courseworks, so it all got kind of pushed to the back of your brain. So to then do them again with a different teacher and with different students around you, not only enriched your own original notes, but it was good to remind you of it all.
You get 4 free periods a week, or you did get 4 free. How did you use them?
At the beginning of the year, not doing very much, honestly, but...
No, that's fine. Why?
I didn't really need to. I think within the first couple of weeks, it is a lot of making new friends and integrating with new students. So it was a lot of kind of being in the social area, in the canteen, and talking to new people, and with your original friends as well. But as the year went on, it was just the library. Near exam season, it was hard to get a seat in the library. You had to be at the beginning of that free period, at the very beginning, otherwise there were no seats. And then by about early May, even all the seats in the social area and benches outside and in the canteen were full of just students revising.
So would you say, let's say for instance by February, how many of the free periods are you using as study periods?
I'd say about 3/4, half or 3/4. Either just reading or, February was a lot of coursework by that time, so editing courseworks and researching and things like that. Not so much revising because that was after the mocks, but in early January, revising for the mocks.
Brilliant. Okay, and 4 heavy subjects. How do you manage and prioritise things when you're an A-grade student in all 4 subjects?
Timetables.
How do you mean?
List making. In late February, went on my computer and went onto calendar program on my computer and planned out the next couple of months up until the exams, thinking, okay, breaking down each unit that I had and doing a bit a day, and then as I got close to exams, increasing that workload. So then you kind of feel like a sense of accomplishment, or at least I do, when I've ticked something off the list I need to do that day. And it's good to set yourself something to do instead of just being, I'm going to revise today. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to revise, but it gives you kind of targets. And it's also a good way of thinking in terms of balancing between the subjects, like you said, because you can visually see on the calendar, like if I colour coded it. So if it was all green and that was English, I thought, okay, I need to put some more philosophy revision in there, or history revision or something else.
That's excellent. And now finally, we're at the end of the year. If you could go back to the beginning again, if you could give one piece of advice to your earlier self, or to any student coming to Woodhouse in 2014, September, what kind of advice would you give them?
Don't stress out as much as I did at the beginning of the year over bad grades. I got really put down when I wasn't getting A's like I was at the end of GCSEs, that you've been doing for 2 years and working towards. And then coming in and not getting the best grade was really not the best feeling, but I just wish I kind of didn't focus so much on that and just moved on. And I did eventually, and I did get good grades eventually, but I focused too much on the bad at the beginning of the year, I think.
Okay. Ellie Morley, A-grade student, Woodhouse College, thank you very much for your time.